Hi everybody, Derek from SparkFun here, and we're in my shop. Wanted to share just a quick, simple project with you that solves a problem that many of you may actually have, similar to me. I've worked for SparkFun for a couple of years now, and over those years I've amassed quite an amount of breakout boards, development boards, shields, and all of those other things. Recently, I've expanded my Qwiic collection with Qwiic breakout boards, and I store it like this, type compartmentalized case, and it's a mess, probably similar to how a lot of your compartments look. And I wanted something that was more accessible. I wanted something that's invisible so that I can grab it right away or be inspired by it, because if it's put away, it's out of mind. And I was thinking about how to be able to attach these things to the wall and make them accessible. And I was putting together a kit that we currently sell, and we use this 3M dual lock. It's basically Velcro for the 21st century. New style of Velcro. It attaches to itself, so you don't have a hook and a loop, but it actually, one side attaches. They're both hook and they're both loop. Uses it to attach a battery for a robot. And I got thinking, well, what if I just use that to hook development boards or mount different circuit boards to things? And that became my solution. So I got to thinking, how can I use this space right here above my monitor and be able to mount some of this stuff? So I went to the local big box hardware store and started looking at the options, and they sell it in two options. They sell it in little, basically 4-inch lengths, as well as rolls of it. And so I got some roll, I got some length, and I'm going to start to add hook and loop to all of my Qwiic boards on the back side, and then I'm going to build a strip of molding that will actually have some of this stripping on it, so that I can just snag and grab things off of it. I decided to use a piece of just white plain molding in some of my test cases and test uses. This dual lock actually sticks better to a surface that's painted and nice and smooth and clean versus something that is just plain wood grain, similar to plywood or something like that. If you're trying to pull things off of it, you pull the whole thing off. I'm also going to use a staple gun and staple it down to the molding so that it just gives a little bit of extra adhesion to the molding, so that over time I'm not pulling this off and it becomes a frustration in the project. I've also started using this stuff a lot around the shop, a lot more. Primarily when I want to adhere something to the wall, the ceiling, or my desk, and that I might not want it there all the time, but I might want it there for some other reason. So for example, the webcam I'm talking to right now is actually adhered to the wall via the dual lock. I have put a couple other spots around the shop just to show you. Down here on my desk, I have some. So for example, I have a battery that has it. So if I wanted to just have the battery attached, I can attach it and then take it off pretty easily. Battery's a weird situation for that one, but if, for example, if I wanted to test a distance sensor here in the shop, I can actually mount it to a vertical surface so that it's a ray is pointing out. With that, let's get started. So I got my piece of molding. I wiped it down already. I didn't use anything like a alcohol prep pad or anything. I just used a lipless shop towel, wiped it down. And then I cut it to 4 feet long because the dual lock strips come in 4 feet, but I have about 4 feet on the other side of the monitor. And I'm going to stick this down so that the dual lock is right at the bottom edge of this. And here's the reason why. Instead of doing it in the middle, one, I want to have access to, when I end up screwing this to the wall, I want to have access to those screw heads. I want those relatively centered in the piece of molding so that I can take this on and off or move it around if I want to. And the other reason is some of the boards I want to attach it. So for example, our servo hat here for the Pi have connectors on the bottom, so they don't have it perfectly flat. So I want to be able to put dual lock on the bottom of this and have it stick, but basically have relief for those headers. So that's why it's going to be down at the lower edge. It also gives me space if I wanted to add labels later on. I'm still debating that. At the very top, it gives me space to label those things. So with that, I'm gonna get going here. I'm gonna start out one end and just get this dual lock on here. And then you'll see me come back through with the staple gun and staple it as well. And then we'll get things going. So here we go. I found that this stuff is pretty sticky, so I try not to unwrap the whole thing all at once and kind of pull the backing off 6 inches, 4 inches at a time, and kind of apply it down the molding as we go. Yeah, this stuff is really cool. I'm a big fan of Tested and Adam Savage's videos, one day builds, things like that, and actually saw him use, I believe he used dual lock, if not Velcro, to adhere a battery pack into a project. And that got me thinking of, you know, we sell that stuff. It's in some of our kits. We should put it to good use in a project here in my shop. And so that in a way inspired this project, or at least inspired me to get off the couch and do the project. Okay, like that, and then I'm gonna basically work my way down here again, just adding pressure to it, make sure it sticks. Nothing's gonna kind of peel off of it later. Now, just a staple gun. I don't even know what size staples I have in here. Your basic looks like a 3/8 staple, and only actually have a few in here, so I'm just going to use a few. But I'm going to put one about every 6 inches or so. Down the length of this. Again, this isn't required necessarily, but it is something that I always tend been leery of something like this, of Velcro or anything like that, because over time it just peels off, right? And then you got stuff left on whatever you're trying to adhere and things like that. So I want to make sure that there's some staying power to it for the foreseeable future. So I'm gonna definitely get a staple here right on the end, and then go about every 9 inches or so. Again, you want to check, make sure the staples are kind of below the level of the dual lock, and it looks like most of them are. I tested it on a few other things, that if you have a high staple, you can either take a screwdriver or a punch and punch it down a little bit more. That seems to work really well, but it looks like I got the stapler pushed down enough that I don't need to worry about that. And before we mount this on the wall, we'll get some dual lock on some of the breakout boards. So I have my Qwiic boards here. I'm actually just going to make a mess. Put them out. Let's see here. Some of them, I was testing out the idea, so some of them already have it already. So those I'm going to put to one side. So some boards, like I said, like the hats and things like that, shields that have connectors on the bottom of them are kind of trickier. So we have to think about, one, are they going to lay flat to my system, the piece of molding? And two, am I covering something up on the back of the breakout board that I might need later? I have access to a number of these, so it's, for me, usually I have multiple boards of single sensor or skew, so I'm not too worried about making sure that I have these pins populated with headers if I want to use them in a breadboard situation or hook them up via wire. I'm going to be planning on using just the Qwiic system for most of the Qwiic boards, but there are some boards that I might want to populate in terms of pins and headers and things like that. So for example, this Artemis board, probably want to populate headers first before applying the dual lock on the back of it. So some of the breakout boards, development boards, so for example, here's an Artemis Uno form factor. I slapped some dual lock on the back of it. I did end up covering up the coin cell battery holder on this one, but I did try to leave a number of the other pads available to me for later use if I so wanted to do it. So I'm going to go through and get some of these boards worked up, ready to go before we go put that on the wall. So I'm just going to get to work. I use an X-Acto knife or a razor blade to cut it. My table, I'm going to protect it with just a piece of cardboard so that I can get working through it. And I cut from the adhesive side forward so that I can kind of see where I'm cutting. And I, again, make multiple passes. Set that aside. The dual lock is 1 inch wide. And so for most of our Qwiic boards, it's actually really nice because the form factor of these Qwiic boards are 1 inch wide themselves. So for example, this is our ambient light sensor. I don't necessarily need anything on the back, so I'm just going to apply this pretty straightforward, peel the back off, kind of use my fingers as a gauge or guide, and get that on there. Give it a good nice press, and we're good to go there. So with that said, let's see here. Crypto coprocessor, and cut about 3/4 of an inch of the dual lock off, multiple passes, and add that to the board. I'm gonna get these going. Here's a board that I want to have access to these pins and possibly headers in the future, but I'm not necessarily going to populate that now. So this is one of our RTK GPS breakout boards. And so there's enough space between these that I can actually add dual lock and still have space to solder. Some of these don't sit completely flat. You might see that, backs of pin headers or components, things like that, are sticking up under it. I just try to press this as best I can down and hope for the best in that situation. But I found that it sticks pretty well for that. Good old red board. Just put a good sized chunk on it. And the reason that I like this, not only for storage solutions at my desk, but as I build projects, and the nature of my projects tend to be things that I build for tutorial or for a hookup guide, and then they get disassembled or get thrown in the corner. And so I want to be able to take these components, be able to embed them in a project, and then later on be able to take that project apart and reuse them as much as possible. Qwiic is a huge component of that, but to be able to remove and add something and adhere it in a very solid way, but then still be able to remove it, is this dual lock is really good for that. Again, let's just get a few more. Okay, should be good for now. I am going to mount this to the wall, and I've already marked where the center of my studs are. I'm actually going to screw this with some construction screws, one per stud, and we'll see how it goes from there. I might end up unscrewing it using some liquid nails or some adhesive on the back as well. But again, I still want to be able to keep this removable, so I don't know if that's the best. Actually, it's not the best solution. So I'm hoping that just a couple screws in it will keep it from flapping and moving around too much when I decide to pull the board off. So I have level, some screws, and I want this. I'm going to get this relatively level and then put the center screw in. Pretty easy to mount, and I can clean some things up later, either put paint over the screws or whatever. Let's add some board, see how it works. Yeah, you can obviously sort your stuff however you like in your own way. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? I can kind of put these at an angle. I don't need to be picky about it unless you're very controlling and obsessive compulsive, which sometimes people are, and I am about my own way sometimes. Let's see here. Cool. This is 70-21. There. Let's see here. I got a pi 0 and another hat. Add it really quickly. Then I can put it over here in my controllers. Even the bigger development boards. So this is a NVIDIA Jetson Nano. This dual lock is, I think it's per inch length is 2 pounds of weight that it can hold. So that's obviously more than enough for this. I'm just taking a look at the bottom and there doesn't seem to be any components. Super small components on the bottom of this. Everything's pretty much populated and I don't need access to anything on the bottom of this. So I'm actually gonna throw this up there too. Comes off pretty easily. Cool, I'm good there. This already has one on there. Now, I was saying that about using this as a way to adhere things to different places. So, inside of an enclosure, instead of figuring out where to drill or screw or bolt things down, just put some of the dual lock and be able to lock it down. Like I was saying before, this piece here on my desk, a lot of times when I'm testing out development boards and testing out some code, I want to be able to mount it on a vertical surface and be able to test distance sensors. A lot of times we're doing it vertically just because it's sitting flat on a desk, but to be able to do it horizontally for some reason is always good. So we can take, let's see here, take a time of flight distance sensor. But I can take this and I can just mount it on the table, have the development board up here, or even mount it next to it. And I can take a pi 0 and my Qwiic servo hat. Now I can just mount it right next to it and then have a Qwiic cable that connects it. So now I have an entire kind of development platform that's mounted to my desk. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to go flying off anywhere. It's not going to get covered up by things. And I can adjust it however I want. So it's a pretty good platform for that. And then I can put things away when I don't need them anymore. I've placed one on the workbench here, again on the inner surface. On the back wall, there's multiple spots for my webcam so that I can get a higher shot if need be. And there's even one up on the ceiling so that I can get an overhead shot from a webcam as well. So with that, that's a really quick way to add storage space for your breakout boards that's accessible and also be able to mount your hardware in different places that you may necessarily not want to put a screw or glue or things like that. Be able to access it later. So with that, let me know how else you think thread or dual lock should be used. We can go from there. So have a good day. Hope you're all staying safe and staying home. Talk to you later. Bye.